Hello everybody, I'm back for my continued review of Tiff and Mildred's relationship. I'm reviewing episodes 7 through 9 and we'll do a separate review of the reunion episode. So please go back and watch my review of episodes 1 through 6 of this couple. We can learn a lot from them. The goal of these videos is to learn how to communicate better, red flags to watch out for, and how we can heal ourselves and have healthier relationships. My name is Catherine Sloan. I've been a licensed therapist for 20 years. I am married to a wonderful woman and we have 4 kids. Please like and subscribe to my channel. Let's get started. In episode 7, we see them having a beautiful date by a fire, and they do try to have a productive conversation about their communication barriers.
You know that's what you first said when we first met?
Yeah.
You know, you said, ew.
Yeah.
I like your earrings you're wearing.
Thank you. You look really good too. I like that turtleneck. It looks nice.
Tiff seems to have a lot of insight here about how it seems like they are going into arguments with facts already made up in their heads about each other. And that's probably very true for them.
I think we're both guilty and we come off like we're accusing already. We make up facts in our head and make up our own conclusions. That's why we interrupt each other.
And as humans, we do take note of behavioral patterns, and then we do expect those same patterns. And here, Mildred uses passive-aggressive communication in their discussion about healthy communication.
How often do you feel like I don't let you talk?
All the time?
So I should just be quiet?
No.
When do I have permission to speak?
It's not that you should have permission to speak.
This is very frustrating to watch because I'm not sure she even realizes she's passive aggressive, and a lot of times people don't realize they are using passive aggressive behavior. So let's talk about what this is. And just as an aside, I personally have a PhD in passive aggressive communication through experience, and I have been working on trying to eliminate it my whole life, and sometimes I still don't know when I'm doing it. And I'm a grown woman, so I get it. One definition of passive-aggressive behavior is a style in which the person appears passive on the surface, but they're really acting out anger in a subtle, indirect, or behind-the-scenes way. It's indirectly expressing feelings, and this is when someone uses subtle digs or negative comments about somebody. It can be using sarcasm to indirectly hurt somebody, and these comments can often be diffused as humor. And also the silent treatment is a form of passive-aggressive communication. It's also when someone deliberately pushes your buttons by doing things they know you don't like. It could be leaving the house a mess to get back at your partner for something they did when you know they hate a messy house. There's also a form of passive aggressiveness called pretend victimhood, where the person plays weak or acts like a martyr in order to manipulate or exploit the partner's goodwill or guilty conscience. I see Mildred having a lot of passive-aggressive communication in her conversations with Tiff. And this exchange is where they admit they don't let each other finish their thoughts, and they often interrupt each other. And Mildred says she is Latina, and in her culture they are used to speaking above each other, and she says if you don't speak loud, then you're not heard. And this is when Tiff states that being respectful has no race.
I'm a Latina, and when you're with Latinos, everybody speaks over everybody. You've been to my family's house, if you don't speak louder, then you're not being heard.
And I'm an asshole, and I tend to speak over people.
Okay, I think
It is true that we learn communication patterns from our culture, and some cultures do have a lot of loud banter. And this is where Mildred learned her communication, but just because that's what we're used to doesn't make it right, especially when it's hurting our relationship.
I am a Latina, and I'm always going to be a Latina until I die. What do you want me to do?
Being respectful has no race, Mildred.
Also, we have to be careful when a partner makes this statement like, well, that's just who I am. So this indicates that it's something they don't see as a problem that they are willing to change. But it also depends on what the issue is. I do get that. So if it's a trait like shyness or getting cold easily, then that's a trait where somebody can say, this is just who I am. But when it's something that's causing significant distress in the relationship and it's a behavior, then just saying this is just who I am is telling the other person that you're not willing to work on it and they just have to deal with it, and that's not really fair. In this instance, Mildred is telling Tiff that she can expect to change this trait of interrupting. At least that's the way I perceive her in this situation. Mildred does ask how she can stop interrupting, so I do see some willingness there and an attempt to understand in some way. And then she says it's hard to not interrupt Tiff because Tiff talks a lot. So Tiff says we need to both feel heard and understood, and that is true for every single person. Then Mildred goes on to say that she just needs a partner who can give her unconditional support.
You're always gonna be someone I love, but I need unconditional support from my partner. That's what I need.
It doesn't matter how much I love you. It doesn't matter what it is. It's
What do you
such
mean
bullshit.
it doesn't matter how much you love me?
So here, instead of taking responsibility for her own issues with communication and committing to changing them, she just wants Tiff to accept her unconditionally. Instead of focusing on working on her issues here, Mildred deflects and makes it look like Tiff is the one with the problem because Tiff can't handle the pressure of making the decision of whether or not to get married. I just want to add that if you have high blood pressure or easily get anxious, don't watch that section 4 times straight through like I did. It is brutal and it's very confusing because there's a lot of like deflecting and not staying on topic. I also want to add that I'm so glad a therapist doesn't review my arguments with my partner because it's really hard to manage our feelings when we are dysregulated, and I totally understand that. A lot of times we do realize in hindsight how we could have handled things differently. Then we learn and grow. But in this conversation, however, they are specifically talking about improving their communication, and it could have been a moment to put the armor down and actually make progress on this issue. It could have been a big turning point. I could be wrong, and I know there are probably many other perspectives here, and I'm open to other perspectives, so please comment if you see it differently. On their next date, they are sitting by the pool, and it's another intense conversation where they are reflecting on their dynamics. And Tiff says to Mildred that when they have fights, Tiff feels tossed away. So after many times of this happening, Tiff says they start to feel numb and feel disposable.
Moment, you just toss me away. You just kind of throw me away, After many times and dozens of times, it started to hurt so much that
Tiff is very clear that they are terrified that if they get married and then have an argument, Mildred's going to want a divorce. Mildred admits that she's afraid of being rejected, and she actually admits that she has failed in the relationship. She admits that Tiff has always been there for her, and even when Mildred breaks up with her, Tiff is back on the doorstep the next day. She says she is grateful that Tiff is still here for her. It was a very touching moment, and it ends with Mildred saying something like, "If you can let me, I'll show you and be that person I need to be."
Or never. And if you let me, I can show you that every single day. I can't be afraid anymore.
And this all sounded really good. I think it's these moments that make us hopeful and make us think there's progress being made with this couple. But just keep in mind that saying you want to change is a lot different than actually being able to carry out these changes in the heat of the moment. At the beginning of episode 8, called Is Love Enough?, we see them at the beach together with Shiloh and Zoe, and they have some good laughs together about the dogs rolling in the sand. It's really cute.
just like having, I think that just having this, oh God, fuck, okay.
So, you still want to move in?
This is when we learn that Mildred has a 16-year-old special needs son. It seems like in this conversation, they do listen to each other, and Tiff talks about how patient Mildred is with her son. And one thing I do appreciate about them is that they can give each other compliments very easily when they aren't in the middle of chaos. So this brings up another reason why this is such a big decision around marriage for Tiff. Again, it's one thing to be able to just sit on the beach, relaxing and talking about living together and co-parenting, but it's another thing to actually do it. And this means that they haven't actually lived together yet to see how this would be for them and all the things that could come up for them. And a lot of issues would come up. So now I come to the understanding that all the fighting and breaking up they do happens without them even living together. So I can just imagine that actually living together could pose a huge challenge for them. Their last night together, we hear about Mildred's first marriage, and Tiff is very concerned when Mildred says that she married her first wife because she trusted her, not because she was in love with her.
Person as what we have.
But the fact is, you were actually never in love with your ex-wife, yet you married her. That's very scary.
Tiff says that this is very scary for them to hear. This conversation actually went okay. It wasn't as hostile as other conversations they have had. Mildred is able to stay calm in this conversation, and Tiff asks her if she actually takes marriage seriously. Tiff makes it clear that they are confused about Mildred's motivation for wanting marriage.
You go back and forth between, I love this person, but I wasn't in love, or I didn't know what love meant, or I didn't, it's your version of love is all over the place. Do you really take...
This leaves the viewer on the hook, wondering if there will be a proposal. The next day in episode 9, we see both of them getting ready for the big day. Then they get picked up and taken to a beautiful location by the beach where they went on their first date or one of their first dates. The editors here do a great job of making this very suspenseful. Tiff gives this heartfelt speech about how much they have learned through this experience. It's very poetic.
allowed me to put my soul and my feelings on the line. I've been learning so much about me.
Tiff admits to messing up a lot in their relationship, and Mildred keeps saying, I want you to love me unconditionally. And I wish I knew what she meant by this. I think this shows how insecure she is and how desperately she needs security. I've heard her say this a few times, and I think it's important to note that we don't have to love anyone unconditionally if they are abusive. Not family, not kids, not partners. Now, we can love them from afar. I've got abusive family members that I have decided to love from afar, but I definitely don't let them in my inner circle. Love is an action word. You will know if someone loves you by the way they treat you, not just by their words. Also take note that once Tiff gives their long romantic speech, Mildred pauses and says, "Are you done talking?"
What about you?
Were you done talking?
Now, I know this might be hard for some people to see, but this is a passive-aggressive response to Tiff telling her on their earlier date that Mildred interrupts her too much. So do you see how subtle this can be? It's sort of a jab, right? It's a way of being aggressive, but in a very passive way. Asking Mildred to marry them, and they have a long embrace.
Mildred, will you marry me?
I must say that Tiff had a lot to say in this engagement speech. I think it was one of those where we were all hoping maybe they would decide not to get engaged, but we also long to see people express and feel loved. Of course, this is just my perspective. We are all hoping for a happy ending, even though it's very unlikely. Now, ideally, they would commit to about 6 months of couples therapy and individual therapy before moving forward with any commitments or living together. None of their issues have been truly resolved in the 8 weeks of this show. They will more than likely just continue in this roller coaster pattern. But I do appreciate them both allowing us to see this part of their lives and how hard they are trying to figure this out. So that's the end of the 9th episode before their reunion, and I will cover their interaction of their reunion in a separate video. And please know that if you notice that you are in a relationship that feels like a trauma bond, you can get out, find a therapist or a friend, and make sure to get some support. Also, if you realize that you might have CPTSD, there are treatments for this to help you cope and feel better. There are many interventions that we use to help people heal. I will leave some links to group therapy practices in my video description. That's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. This is your reminder to go drink a tall glass of water and take a deep breath. I'll see you next time.